speak directly into your microphone. It may mean we have to shuffle mics up and down the table, but that's all right. That's worth it so that others can hear the business of the board. So I appreciate everybody's help on that and tolerance of my perhaps untimely reminders. Okay, so that brings us to the first opportunity for public comment on agenda items. The board encourages public input and comments that are courteous, considerate, and concise, as they may contribute to the decision-making process. We will conduct our meetings civilly and respectfully. All public comments deserve the same respect from all who are present. This public comment period is an opportunity to be heard by the board on agenda items only, specifically action items that are listed for official action and identified agenda items for deliberation. Comments are to be directed to the entire board, not one individual board member, administrator, staff member, or the audience. Comments will be timed and limited to 3 minutes or less. Please note, board and staff members will not normally respond to comments or questions during our meeting. When you hear your name called, please come forward. You do not need to state your name or address before sharing your remarks. Our first speaker this evening is a student, Johnny Allen, Spring Garden Township, and he is addressing the Crabtree update under our building project. First of all, let me say welcome. We're glad. No, please proceed. We're glad. We don't often hear from students, so we're especially glad to hear from you this evening. Johnny, again, into the microphone. I'm sorry. There we go.
I'm just here to say, as a high school student on the swim team, I've been swimming since I was 9 here at Suburban. Being a part of this community and swimming specifically has to me a lot about health, which I don't believe I would have learned elsewhere. For example, I tend, like most kids, to eat junk food and candy, but I learned by swimming that eating healthy made me perform better. I would never have learned this without this program. Beyond swimming, I have taken these healthy habits to use them in my academics and other sports. I feel I have performed better in everything because of swimming. I believe that doing well in school academically is important, that I am an honors and AP student, but I also believe that if I did not have sports in my life, I wouldn't do as well in school, and colleges would not be impressed with me. Also, the swim community is one of the best things I have in my life, and I've gained many deep friendships through this program. Lastly, I have a younger sister involved in TAC, and I'm extremely worried she won't have a swimming program in the future. I appreciate you listening to me, and I hope you will consider what I have to say.
Thank you. Our next commenter, Rachel Allen, Spring Garden Township, also addressing the building project. Hi, welcome.
It seems to me that a lot of people only think that 24 high school students use our pool. For anyone that is not aware, there is an entire club team called TAC, which is Trojan Aquatic Club, that uses this facility. This is the program that feeds our high school team, and I asked the president of the TAC board, Joe Cockenauer, to send me some numbers to present to show how much this program is growing, as he couldn't be here today. This starts after COVID. Our first winter season back, 2021 to 2022, we had 63 students. And then the following winter season, 2022 to 2023, we had 74 students. And then last year, we had 113 students. We've almost doubled in 3 years. Despite how tiny despite how tiny our pool is, the high school swim team and TAC have added multiple practices in order to be able to properly work with every kid in the program. Getting rid of the pool would kill our program altogether because even though other pools may offer rental prices, that does not mean there are actual time slots available to service all of our kids. And York Suburban would not pay for tax rental costs, therefore the program would cease to exist altogether. I know this because TAC has already done some research for spaces in case there's a renovation and we have to move out for a year. And there's no time slots available for us because all the existing police programs would actually allow for them to grow even more. As of now, TAC has to put a cap on the amount of kids they accept because our lack of space is impossible to host all the swimmers that are interested. On top of that, if we had an adequate pool, we could host tournaments to raise money, maybe even offer open swim to community members, and even more importantly, provide a space for all of our students to learn to swim. As drowning is the #1 death of children in America, and this is because most children don't have access to a pool. Would it be great if we could provide a way for all suburban children to learn how to swim? That might be a dream, but the reality is we lose the pool and the program, we might lose families, and we might lose a lot of people that really love suburban. We have a couple kids from Eastern school districts in our TAC program, and I've gotten to know the parents, and they're really worried about when their kids hit high school because they might have to move, they might have to change everything because there's no swimming offered, and I just don't want to see that for all of our families. We love everything that Suburban has to offer, so I'm not trying to be negative. We're involved in many things, so I just wanted to make it clear that we love Suburban, and we just wanted to keep moving forward. We're really excited about the future, and we just think that it offers a lot to our program that people might not hear from. And mostly, I say that because the people that really want it are really busy, so we can't be here all the time, and I don't want you to think that we don't care, but we're constantly running around doing things for kids, and we just really can't express to everybody how much it means to us. So thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Rin Caputo, also Spring Garden Township, addressing the topic of the pool. Hi, good evening.
I come here tonight to address the topic of the pool, but to also speak out for what we as parents of the students who are really having a hard time dealing with the noise visually from the signs, but also from discussions that are being had, to say that we're not the silent minority, as we're often being told. We're hopeful that we're actually the silent majority. As Mrs. Allen just said, we are busy, and I know everybody's busy. I feel like I come with a unique perspective because I just moved into the district 2 years ago. I moved here specifically to get my child into a better school program. Both children, actually. Now, one child still goes to York Catholic. Why? Because on his tour of this facility, in his teenage mind and words, he said, "Mom, that place is a dump. Why would I want to go to school there?" Now, I immediately corrected him and told him that that was an inappropriate response. But my younger son, Mateo, came first to the middle school and now to the high school, where he is a AP honor student. He's a cross-country runner, he's a swimmer, he's a diver at Dover, where we take him because we have no diving program here, but it's something that's important to him. He's a track runner, and he's part of the pole vaulting program. He has embraced everything that Suburban has to offer. And of all those programs, the one that holds his heart dear are the coaches and the swimmers, the alumnus who come back and do volunteer activities just because they still want to be a part of it. They mentor our children. It may seem like a dollar figure to someone. You may be looking at that and saying, why does that matter? Not all kids are getting to participate in that, but they can, and they would if it was a better facility, quite frankly. I know that a lot of people are saying that teachers teach our children, buildings don't. You know what? We have pretty good water quality here at York Water, but every year, as you guys know, when you drive around, they're renovating, right? They're fixing the infrastructure to make sure that the quality can still get to the people in the right way. And I feel like that's what we need to make sure that we do for our children. In a world where we are polarized and people have very different opinions, there should be one thing that we can come together on, and that is doing whatever we can to educate our children the best we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next commenter is Josh Carney, Spring Garden Township, also addressing the topic of the CRA report. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Thank you. I probably don't need 3 minutes. I did want to try things I thought were very actually made up. For context, I am a structural engineer, have been for 30 years, and I was the author of the report written in 2009. I thought they captured the necessary data. They're addressing the carbonation in the concrete, they're addressing the chloride penetration in the concrete, and generally the things that they are suggesting we could use to buy time are the correct solutions to buy time. Having said that, having been in the buildings industry my entire career, and by the way, as a previous TAC parent, now a high school swimmer parent, having swam for Spring Grove as a kid growing up and come to visit York Suburban, I think all I would suggest, and as we do this evaluation, is to remember that kicking the can down the road is not an answer, and this pool isn't going to last forever. And doing a major renovation now, patching it up another time, just leaves another facility in the middle of the footprint of the building that's not going to last forever. So I think my suggestion as a buildings specialist, and is, again, what I've done for a living, is we really think hard about our alternatives, other ways to capture the operational benefits of a new pool, the performance. They reference the ability to have something that's more attractive to community. I think these things are worth doing. Again, kicking it down the road for another 20 years just puts it in somebody else's lap. But having said that, I also have worked with Crabtree for many, many years. They are creative and they do come up with great solutions. I think it really benefits us as suburban parents, as suburban residents, to let them do their job and let them be the experts at this that they are. And I think they can bring us the best long-term solution for York Suburban, for the program that has such a storied history. I was not a sports kid too much growing up, but I've seen what youth sports did for my own children and how much it taught them discipline and how to work as part of a team. And swimming has been a classic, well-known sport for 30 years at York Suburban, and I don't think we should give up on that easily. And beyond that, I think we should acknowledge it. It is as important a part of the process as anything else. The rest of the school, frankly, is in need of a lot of work. And I mean, we all know that buildings don't last forever. I know it sounds horrifying to people when they hear about buildings being torn down. Living in the buildings industry, I can tell you the building is the least valuable thing that we have here. And upgrading the building allows us to do things that we can't currently do. So I think that you got the good team on the project. I think we should let them do their job, and I think we should follow that decision where it takes us. Thanks.
Thank you. Jenny James, Spring Garden Township, also the Crabtree report. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, and thank you. I'm going to address the board's approval of the additional $10,000 requested by Crabtree Construction at the August 26th board meeting. Mr. Wentz of Crabtree Construction requested the $10,000 to cover pre-construction, as I understood it, soil assessment samples that were very recently done at that time. And he explained that this was a second assessment that was needed because, as he admitted upon questioning by a board member, the construction company had failed to adequately coordinate with the township so that the previous samples were incorrect. When questioned, Mr. Wentz's reasoning for the additional charge was that, as he stated, this was a fast-moving project and on a very short timeline, and the mistake was due to a bit of a rush and some miscommunication with the township. I understand that things can happen. But in February 28th, as a matter of fact, of this year, there was a newscast that WGAL had put out, And they stated during that newscast that residents in the York Suburban School District are concerned about a possible tax hike to fund a $120 million renovation package that has been a decade in the making. Additionally, I've looked at the Future Forward documents and the PFM presentations provided on your website, and I found that a feasibility study had begun in August of 2016, and that by April of 2021, 5 years later, Future Forward planning work began. Design and bidding began in November of approximately of 2022. So my question is, how is it possible that a project that is a decade in the making and for which the board's published reports state that the work of estimating and assessment began in 2018 could be considered so rushed that a professional construction company would obtain incorrect samples because of a failure to communicate with the township? That's a critical piece of project management. And more importantly, why would it be the taxpayer's burden for such a mistake? My concern is that there may have been, and perhaps will be, other mistakes because things happen that we taxpayers will be picking up the tab for. Isn't it standard procedure that when a professional company makes an error, the correction is made at their own expense, not the client's? As our elected representatives for the school district, we put our trust in the board to be the vigilant gatekeeper for expenses. And I do appreciate the fact that in general, you do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Joel Sears, Spring Garden Township. The design update, I believe, is his topic as well. And you have a handout, which I'll distribute to the board at this time.
Thank you. I'm here today to request a timeout relative to the construction and renovation projects. I made the same request at the Property and Finance committee meeting last Monday. My first concern is the multi-million-dollar cost difference between CRA's estimates and the numbers presented by Gilbert Architects only 5 years ago. In 2023 dollars, their high-end cost estimates ranged from $49.4 million for maintaining the current 6-building footprint to $105.3 million for a complete reconfiguration, including a $12 million pool. The last estimates from CRA totaled $120 million for only 2 schools. With this much variation between the estimates, it's hard to imagine moving ahead without a detailed reevaluation by an independent third party to set the record straight. I think you owe it to our new board members to review the previous architect's work to help them understand how the scope and cost of the project evolved to its current status. I also think we need a contingency plan, call it a Plan B, similar to CRA's 10-year outlook for maintaining the district with a sustainable time-phased approach like we've used successfully for the last 50 years. My second concern continues to be the way the district represents the taxpayer impact of these projects. The handout I gave you shows 4 financing scenarios, the most recent of which came before the Property and Finance Committee last Monday. There are slight differences in the underlying assumptions designed to reflect current market conditions and options for reducing the surplus or reducing the payback period by 4 years. Here's what it looks like for the average assessed value, and you'll notice that that's in yellow in your handout. Looking at the March 13th document that came from Raymond James via PFM, that was called PFM Study 1, using the assessed value of $162,984 for all 4 scenarios. That's purported to be the average assessment of homes here in the district. The share of the total in that March 13th document would be $23,029 for that assessed value, or an average of $720 per year. Looking all the way to the right, which would be the lowest cost, that was designed to shorten the debt service. Again, the same assessed value, but this time a total share of about $19,062 for an average of $681 per year. The average annual cost is approximately 8 times the estimated annual tax increase per year in the updated tax impact calculator on the district website. I respectfully ask you to add the total taxpayer cost to the calculator, including prior amounts that have been allocated to the project since the 2023 school year, and to make it conform with the detail and the totals in all 4 of the exhibits that were presented in the March study and on September the 16th. You'll find copies of those, I'm sure, on the website. So thank you.
Thank you. Kathy Schaefer, Spring Garden Township. Again, a comment on the superintendent's report, I believe. Good evening.
Good evening. My comments are actually previous comments from the July 24th, 23 meeting. They were not my comments, so I'll be quoting the speaker from my report, for my public comments. Quote, "Good evening. My name is Richard Geyer. I live at 2nd Avenue for the last 52 years in York Suburban School District. Swimming is not just going up and down the pool. Swimming is far-reaching. Wins and losses are taken care of by scores, but true wins, you find out 10 or 20 years after our students have graduated. What's become of them? What are their values? And what contributions they are making to their programs and their communities. Probably kept a secret at York Suburban, but well known by our swimming community, our team has been recognized by the National Interscholastic Swim Coaches Association more than 30 times for being one of the best high school teams in the country by awarding us with a top 20 high school award. But even better than that, we have been recognized by the same organization as an academic institution that offers competitive swimming that is in the top 2% of all swimming teams in the United States. We rest on that. If you look at our graduating community of people that are involved in swimming in York Suburban, we have teachers and coaches that are working with students in other communities just like York Suburban. Swimming can be an asset. It doesn't have to be a liability. It needs the right facility, and it needs the right program director to manage it. That being said, a community pool going outside the box with thinking and for instance, cooperating with Spring Garden Township, neighboring school districts, myriad of possibilities of programs from learning to swim to kayaking, how you save your life if your kayak overturns. All of those things and everything in between are life skills that people enjoy that all deal with aquatics. I hope all of you take into consideration the value of an aquatics program. Thank you. Thank you. End quote. Coach Geyer's vision has been developed successfully in other communities, and there are York Suburban community members, taxpayers, who share this vision. Several have the local implementation experience and have expressed their willingness to assist in bringing this potential asset to fruition. I encourage the board to seize this opportunity to build a better future for York Suburban. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes the first opportunity for public comment. Thanks to all those who took the time to come and offer their comments. That brings us to discussion and action on board minutes. I'm seeking the approval of the minutes from the Planning Committee meeting conducted on September 9th, 2024. Were there any additions or corrections to those minutes? So moved. Okay, hearing none, without objection, we can approve those as submitted. That brings us to the treasurer's report. Unfortunately, Mr. Desai is not able to be with us this evening. Mrs. Kindig, did you want to step in for that treasurer's report? Or is someone else?
Sure, it's consent agenda.
Yeah. Should I?
Number two. She can introduce it.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. So before you are the financial reports, and if there's, excuse me, any of the items that you'd like to can be considered separately or have any questions on those items.
Any questions related to the treasurer's report?
Yeah, two questions.
Mr. Sanders.
Thank you for recognizing me. In the checks for the capital, I think it's the capital expenditures, capital project report, there's a check for $113,605 to Crabtree, Rohrball and Associates. What is that check for? What services were provided?
Their continuing design services.
I'd like to know what the services were that were provided in the months that it covered, please.
One moment, I'll have to look that up.
Okay. Well, the second one's going to come to the $482,076 to Fry Lutz, again under capital projects. The check that was written, I'd like to know what that was for the public's consumption, please.
The Freiletz is for the 23-24 projects, which were the boiler projects, excuse me, that were approved. I think they started in the beginning of 23. Were all summer, so that's just one of the. It was a bid. It was one of the payments for their services for those projects.
And for the public's consumption, where were the boilers replaced? What schools were they replaced at? Do you have that information for them?
I'm sorry. I should know that. I apologize. That's a project that started before I was here. I can get that information, and we can. I know at the Property and Finance, Jess will be giving a very detailed report next month on that project alone, and so we can have that update. But there were several schools involved.
Sure. For one example is the campus boilers, so the ones that feed the high school campus, the administration center. But I would agree, Mrs. Thompson wasn't here this evening, but she's presenting a full comprehensive review of all the projects that were done this summer.
I mean, do you happen to remember, Dr. Krauser, were Indian Rock or East York involved in these projects at all?
For the Fry Lutz, I do not believe East York was. I'm trying to think if they had repaired one item over Indian Rock, but I don't want to misquote that. Let me get a confirmation 100%.
All right, cool. So we'll get that update at the next meeting. And then do you have the details for Crabtree Rohrball?
I'm almost there, sorry.
All right, cool, thanks.
While she's looking that up, Dr. Krauser, I just want to clarify. Checks are written because we have already approved for that work to be done. So at some point in the last year, we approved whatever work was done. So I just want the public to understand the process. We don't approve it after the fact. Things have already been approved.
Correct.
Thank you for your patience.
No problem. Just to clarify, though, with Crabtree Rohrball, that's an ongoing service obligation. So we do get ongoing invoices, of which we're not approving those invoices as they roll in. I assume, correct, Dr. Krauser? They submit invoice. We've just given a blanket approval to write checks to them right now.
No, there is a contract that was approved.
The contract was approved, but we don't approve each individual invoice. I don't recall saying that.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
But these are all
that's
under.
That's why for the public's consumption, that is why I'm asking questions about specific checks.
Sure.
And I just want to verify that what we approved with Fry Lutz squares with what we approved per the agenda.
Correct. The draw off of the original contract and what that dollar amount meant.
Yep.
Makes
Thank
sense. Yep.
So for that one of the invoices was for design development and K&W Civil Engineering Services, along with the impact study and additional food service consulting aligned with the East York Intermediate project.
Okay, perfect. Are those invoices available to the public, Dr. Krauser, when we receive them? Or can I ask Ms. Kendig that question, Madam President? Okay, thank you. Ms. Kendig, are those invoices available to the public?
They could be subject to right to know, but they're not something that we get thousands of invoices. That's not something that we would post publicly normally.
I understand, but these are two major items. I'm not asking about $100 item. I'm asking about $600,000 plus for two checks, of which one is $432,000, the other one is $113,000. So I think when it rises to that level, it might be of interest to the public, especially since the renovation project for the intermediate school is such a hot button topic, given that we have so many people showing up to our meetings on a regular basis. Just my suggestion, but again, I'm subject to the will of the board.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions regarding the treasurer's report before we vote? Is there a motion?
I would request that the check expenditures get pulled out separately, please.
I'm sorry, the
Check expenditures,
check expenditures.
check summary reports for approval.
Got it. Number
Thank you.
5. So we'll vote on that separately. Again, I'm looking for a motion for the treasurer's report 1 through 4 and 6 through 8. Is there a motion, please? We have a motion and a second. Are there votes to the contrary for items 1 through 4 and 6 through 7? Dr. Sullivan?
It's not. We just wanted to make sure we could hear you.
Just
we can count your votes.
clarifying that we can hear you.
Differently from yours, but
Okay, that's a good thing. So we're pulling out, just to clarify, pulling out the check summaries report, item 5A. So we have a motion and a second for the other items. I'm hearing no votes to the contrary, so that motion can stand approved. And moving on to item number 5, that would be the check summary reports, general fund, food service, capital project, and capital reserve. Again, seeking a motion, please. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the check summary reports. There is a vote to the contrary?
I'm a no vote on that.
Are there other no votes on the check summaries? Okay, so then motion passes. Mrs. Kindig, is that, we got that? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Moving on to the board president's report. I have no report as such this evening. That brings us to the student board representative. Nicole, we're glad to have you.
Thank you. So on September 11, students across the school district took a moment of silence to honor the bravery and unity that the tragic incident of September 11, 2001 has come to symbolize. Similarly, the EMT students participated in a 9/11 stair climb. The 18 students participated in the class climbed the stairs in order to honor those brave responders who participated in the 9/11 incidents. On September 16, Georgetown elementary students celebrated the International Dot Day by participating in dot team activities and having a lot of fun. These activities aim to inspire these students' creativity by encouraging them to leave their marks on the world. The high school marching band participated in the cavalcade of bands competition and tied for third place in the Yankee A division. Congratulations to them. On September 19, Bailey View Elementary School annual Teddy Bear Parade was held. Cheerleaders, marching band, color guard, and families participated in this absolutely funny activity. Thanks to all of them. This is also homecoming week. Students already decorated the high school hallways and are excited about the fun activities prepared for this Thursday and Friday. Hope then to have a lot of fun and an amazing homecoming dance this Saturday, the 28th. Please check out our upcoming athletic events at GSA Athletics on Instagram or on the district website. There is a lot of interesting matches to attend to. And talking about sports, this week the girls soccer team defeated Spring Grove's team 2-1. The boys soccer team defeated the New Oxford team 2-1. The girls volleyball lost against the Dillon Catholic 3-2. and the Gears Polyvores team defeated William Penn's team 3-0, among others. These weeks were very interesting to our sport athletic teams. That's all I have for today. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions for Nicole? Yeah, hats off to the band. That's great.
Yeah, and thank you for the report. And I, again, I harp on 9/11 every year, and I'm very happy to hear that the students took a moment of silence, at least at the high school level. My question to you is the EMT students, who initiated that? Because I want to personally thank whomever drove that initiative as well. I think that's an absolute home run that they took time to specifically recognize, one of the most tragic days in our history.
Yeah. So I'm not really sure about who initiated the activity, but yeah, it's I'm also glad like to hear that even in high school and like elementary school students are like really interested like in the history of this country, and they're like really aimed to participate in this and honor those who lost their lives and just remember them. Thank you.
There we go.
And I can
Thank
add,
you.
and I can add to that, and I did ask Dr. Furman to come up. The teachers of that course, and actually Nicole and I have a very similar report this evening. We'll highlight some of that, but I did ask Dr. Furman to come up and just kind of give us an overview of the teachers that set that up and the experience they did with the EMT course.
I would just say the two teachers of record get credit for that, and that would be Mrs. Katie Green and Mr. Dev Agunji.
Thank you very much. Extend my thanks to them because, again, we have not made such a large concerted effort. And Dr. Krauser, you've started this. I don't remember us doing it per se under prior administrations, but I'm very grateful that they're doing that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you very much, Nicole, for your report. Okay, that brings us to Dr. Krauser and the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Madam President. And I'm going to kind of bring a little bit of Nicole's items to visual here as we look at some of them in the report phase and highlight a few of those items and share a little bit of the imagery of our 9/11 walk. So let me first just talk about these bold moments, and Nicole mentioned quite a few of them, but our marching band did participate in the Cavalcade of Bands competition earlier this month with Cumberland Valley in the Yankee division, which is a very large school district with a very comprehensive program, and our school program did an outstanding job. So congratulations to the students, staff, and families who were involved in that, as well as the color guard. To earn those kinds of awards is quite an accomplishment. And then again, as mentioned, we had the Teddy Bear Parade that was held last Friday. And Mrs. Ashley Markey, our music teacher at the elementary, was the master of ceremonies and did a fantastic job. So an special thanks extended to our cheerleaders, again, our marching band, color guard, our families, and of course the Valley View students who continue to be the best they can be. It was quite an afternoon as they had great weather and had a great experience. And then again, was mentioned, we talked about International Dot Day. So our elementary schools participated in International Dot Day and a variety of themed activities. This day is inspired off of the book by Peter H. Reynolds, which encourages creativity and self-expression by promoting the idea that everyone can make their mark in the world, no matter how big or how small. So that was a big one. And then, of course, we talked about Patriot Day, which was on September 11th. All schools, K-12, did participate in a moment of silence. Communication was occurring at both classroom levels as well as the morning announcements. One school in particular, middle school, the students went out and did a live feed as they moved that flag to half mast. And students and staff paused through that process. And our class, as Dr. Furman mentioned, our EMT class participated in 9/11 stair climb. So there you can see our students engaging in that process. For those 18 class members, climbing that stadium was a very powerful, meaning way to honor the bravery and sacrifice for all those first responders on that fateful day. Also beginning on September 15th, we began our process of celebrating National Hispanic Heritage Month, and we're very proud to celebrate the diverse community this month and every month. York Suburban's heritage, in particular with this Hispanic, is our second largest demographic here in the district. So we're elevating our learning this month around the colorful cultures and the rich histories and the diversity of our Latino and Hispanic communities. So lots of activities occurring at the building levels and the classroom levels, K-12. And last, but certainly not least, we want to provide a big shout out to our art program for their rigorous and inclusive, highly accessible and highly visible programs and the receiving the award of one of only 43 school districts in the entire state of Pennsylvania and one of only 2 in York County to be named an outstanding visual arts community by the Pennsylvania Arts Education Association. It is an absolute honor that can be attributed to the dedication of the amazing art educators as well as the commitments that we see from those students. So lots to celebrate with those moments taking place throughout the course. And I'll talk a little bit more in particular about the homecoming activities as we get to later in the report, but I do have 2 guests joining us this evening with our focus reports. Our first one is Dr. Campbell. As many of you may have known, the commitment as our administrative team moves to the pinnacle of learning at that capstone experience is the earning of a doctorate. And that comes with great sacrifices to a family, to time and all those things. So I'd like to recognize Dr. Campbell for earning this privilege this summer and share a little bit about the work as Dr. Jackson had done with us last year about her work, her research study, the results thereof, and a little bit of education to all of us and the commitment that's involved in the process of obtaining such a high honor.
Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. So Dr. Krauser has given me 15 minutes to sum up years of research, so I'll try my best. So just a brief overview of my research. I wanted to delve into those key aspects for exploration of novice teachers teaching students with learning disabilities in inclusive environments. You can go ahead and proceed to the next slide. So the overarching theme of my research was that every student has a right to education in an environment free from discrimination. The Individuals with Disability Education Act reinforces the principles of equal access for all students with the emphasis of promoting education in the least restrictive environment for students with disabilities. The IDEA also stresses that students with disabilities are provided equal access and are assessed on the same academic standards as their non-disabled peers. Least restrict environment, LRE, mandates emphasis on importance of educating students with disabilities in a general education setting to the maximum extent possible. The mandate also dictates that students with disabilities should not be unnecessarily isolated and should have the opportunity to participate in mainstream classrooms. Please go ahead and forward. So through my research, I noticed that there is a considerable gap between what the federal inclusion legislation outlines and what we're currently seeing in our classroom practices. So while the legislation sets framework, the reality is that classrooms often present challenges. So my research wanted to look at that gap between understanding the factors that influence teachers' attitudes towards preparedness for diverse learning. My research was designed to investigate factors influence perceived preparedness of novel teachers in inclusive environments and looking to enhance the support systems, training programs, and teaching approaches for novel teachers. Please forward. Thank you. So just some historical development in inclusive education. Really, you start to see it start to develop during the 1970s. In 1975, we were first handed the Education of All Handicapped Children Act. This mandated a free and appropriate public education for all students with disabilities. And it was kind of the first law that really talked about that inclusive education by ensuring access to students with disabilities. Not until 1990 was that revised, where we got the Individuals with Disability Education Act, which ensured students with disabilities receive specially designed services tailored to their individual needs, reinforcing the commitment to inclusive education. In 2001, we got No Child Left Behind, that focused on improving accountability, teacher quality, and educational outcomes by setting standards for student achievement, attempting to close achievement gaps. That act was replaced by Every Student Succeeds Act in 2015, aiming to provide equal access for all students by emphasizing flexibility, local decision-making, and comprehensive support for schools. When you look at these laws, what you really see that it becomes evident that each legislation builds upon the previous one, refining our approach to inclusive education and advocating for success for all students. Go ahead and forward, thank you. Pennsylvania was pioneers in what we looked at when we looked at cornerstone cases for inclusive education. The first big court case that we had in Pennsylvania was Park versus the Commonwealth. This comprised of 14 families that their children were being excluded from public education due to intellectual disabilities. So this lawsuit affirmed equal access to education for students with disabilities, and then it also led to the Education Handicapped Children Act in 1975. The next court case that had a lot of relevance to inclusion and inclusive environments was the Gaskin versus Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in 1994. It was filed on behalf of 280,000 students with disabilities. They claimed that the schools were violating IDEA, the Rehabilitation Act, and ADA. They litigated for 11 years and finally had a settlement agreement which advocated for the inclusion of students with disabilities in educational environments. And the reason I wanted to look at this as a topic for my dissertation was that there really is a benefit for inclusive practices, not just for students with disabilities, but also with students that don't have disabilities. So one big push and big benefit of inclusive environments is that social integration and diversity. It creates a culture of respect and belongingness, promotes understanding, acceptance of differences, reduces bullying, and fosters appreciation for diversity and inclusion. People often think that it affects academic outcomes, but inclusion of students with disabilities does not significantly impact the education of typical peers, and in some research, it actually has a positive impact on academic achievement and social development in typical peers. Inclusive environments also foster empathy, collaboration, patience, and positive attitude towards diversity in students, and help students develop skills in helping others and understanding diverse perspectives. Go ahead. So in my research, I had two main questions with two sub-questions. My first question that I explored was, how do novice general education teachers perceive the preparedness for effectively teaching students with learning disabilities in inclusive classroom settings? Under that, I looked at both what supports as well as what barriers impacted the teacher's preparedness for teaching students with disabilities. And then the second question I looked at was what professional development topics were perceived as essential by novice general education teachers to enhance their preparedness for effectively teaching students with learning disabilities in inclusive classroom settings. My participants were all teachers that had less than 5 years of experience, that were currently teaching in Pennsylvania and had firsthand experience working with students with learning disabilities in inclusive settings. So I had a three-pronged data approach. I collected data in three ways. The first was an electronic survey. I had 28 participants in my survey. I decided to use an electronic survey because it was anonymous and it encouraged impartial responses. And then also it was easier for teachers to access, being that it was electronic. The second measure of my research was I held two focus groups via Zoom with a total of 8 participants. And these Zoom sessions actually allow the participants to respond to open-ended questions. And then the third piece of the research was actually I conducted one-on-one interviews with 6 individuals, also conducted via Zoom, and we were able to delve deeper into some of the responses that they shared during the focus groups. So next, just some key findings of my research. For the first research question, which was how do novice teachers perceive their preparedness for effectively teaching students with learning disabilities in inclusive classroom settings. A majority of the participants shared that they effectively instruct students with learning disabilities, feel comfortable in their ability to do so, and have experienced success in educating these students. A large proportion of the participants reported feeling motivated to enhance their skills when working with students with disabilities. However, a majority of participants actively sought out professional development opportunities in teaching students with learning disabilities on their own. Notably, less than half of the participants felt adequately trained to meet the needs of students with learning disabilities, and they felt that they did not possess significant knowledge for teaching knowledge of learning strategies that benefited these students. The next question I looked at was what specific supports do novice general education teachers identify as crucial in enhancing their preparedness for effectively teaching students with learning disabilities inclusive education settings? The surveys indicated that a majority of the participants reported receiving sufficient support from their administrators, special education personnel, and related service providers effectively address the diverse needs of the students with learning disabilities. Participants reported that staff awareness and attitudes significantly impact student success, and a significant proportion of participants reported that effective classroom behavior management strategies were essential for the success of students with disabilities. A few common themes arose throughout my research. Their first was the need for supportive school environment, including roles of the special education teacher and support staff, the importance of administrative support, and collaboration with experienced teachers that had experience in teaching in exclusive environments. Positive behavior supports and the need for positive behavior programs at both the building and classroom level, and then peer mentoring and supports by pairing students with disabilities with stronger peers for academic and social guidance. The next question was, what barriers do novice general education teachers identify in relation to their perceived preparedness for effectively teaching students with learning disabilities in inclusive classroom settings? Among the participants, they identified a lack of adequate coursework to effectively teach students with learning disabilities in an inclusive educational environment as a barrier. They also identified inadequate planning and collaboration time as a barrier, and then also noted the lack of professional development opportunities aimed at addressing their lack of skills of teaching students in inclusive environments. The last question was what professional development topics were perceived as essential by novice general education teachers to enhance their preparedness for effectively teaching students with learning disabilities. They thought that they really didn't lack that foundational knowledge of learning disabilities, characteristics, and their impact on learning. They mentioned that they would really benefit from positive classroom behavior management training, especially for the students that don't respond to traditional programming, differentiation in collaborative teaching, utilizing supports from special education teachers and paraprofessionals, understanding and implementing individualized educational plans, and then sharing and modeling examples of specific design instruction. And that was it. Questions?
Any questions for Dr. Campbell?
Yes, I have questions.
Go.
Did you look at if there were differences between the pathways that these novice teachers had taken to get into the classroom, like traditional versus alternative pathways?
I did not.
Because PDE requires 9 credits of
Correct.
special ed for every pre-service teacher. So I was just wondering if maybe the non-traditional folks hadn't gotten that.
When I did the survey, I did collect background information, and most of them did come through traditional teacher. I think really what came out of it was they felt there was a huge disconnect between the classes that they had that were general education classes and special education classes. Like there was no convergence of the two. They were very separate, where a class on how to bring those two together would have been very beneficial for them.
Okay, so if we can't add a class, then what can we do instead?
One thing I think as a district, what we can do is provide that that PD that they're asking for. So this year, not related to this, already in progress, one thing that we noticed at our middle school and our high school was although we did have co-taught classes, we only saw one type of co-teaching, which mostly was the general education teacher teaches and the special education teacher assists. Right. So we'd like to get them more involved in using some of those different strategies and those different approaches to co-teaching. So we do have the LIU coming in during our professional development time to do some PD on co-teaching, as well as coming in and do walkthroughs and giving feedback to those pairs.
Cool, thanks.
Mrs. Ryrick?
Thank you for sharing your experience. I'm always after the superintendent to let us hear what our new doctoral people have. If for no other reason, we've kind of helped you with get this and given you time and resources to do it. So thank you for sharing what you've learned with both our special ed teachers and with the board. It's very important that we realize that our teachers are doing meaningful research and sharing it with others. Otherwise, I don't see the reason for doing research, frankly. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sanders?
I just want to say congratulations.
Thank you.
On this. This is great work. But my bigger question is, why did you have to go to Point Park and not stay with Pitt?
Pitt did not have an all online program, so I would have had to travel to Pittsburgh on a weekly basis.
Is there something wrong with that?
Well, Dr. Krauser said he would not fund that, so I couldn't go there. No, but I thought Point Park was like the next best thing to the University of Pittsburgh, so that's why I chose it. Still in the right city, so.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah, no, it's the best university in the state of Pennsylvania.
And they beat WVU 2 weeks ago. I don't know if you saw that, but.
That's right, they did. That's right. Oh yeah.
And I live with a mountaineer, so it was a great day.
Dr. Campbell, do you have a vision for this research, like how it can be used in terms of did you learn something, a takeaway for the district, or perhaps a bigger educational takeaway?
Yeah, I thought one thing that was really fascinating about the research was that a lot of the teachers reported that they did feel comfortable, but they also lacked some of those common teaching strategies, and they also they felt like the program that they went to lacked a lot of information about inclusive education, yet they did not seek out those opportunities on their own when it came to professional development. So I think as a district, we need to recognize that that's an area that people are not seeking out on their own. So we really need to make sure that we're providing that as a district for those pairs of teachers, not just pairs of teachers, but also those at the elementary level teachers that have those kids in their classroom every day. And they might not have the tool bag of tricks or strategies to use with students. So I think more that we can get out there to our teachers and teach them how to teach students with disabilities, the better off we're going to be as a district.
Yeah, that's great. And it brings to my mind the importance of professional development just as a whole. I mean, when you think about when a veteran teacher was trained, how the process has changed over time. So I can see the the importance, and I'm glad that was a takeaway for you, the importance, because that happens to be one of the hats you wear, isn't it?
Yes. And we were actually very excited too that when Rebecca built the schedule or built the calendar for the school year, those opportunities for professional development that were built in they're so valuable, because I think sometimes we get into the habit of teachers teach kids, but when are the teachers actually learning? So we need to provide those supports for them as well, especially like you said, if you have a veteran teacher that they might not have a college class in 15, 20 years, how are they getting that most updated information? And I think we do that through professional development.
Right. Thank you. Anything else for Dr. Campbell?
I had just.
Oh, yes, Mr. Robinson.
Dr. Campbell, I'm really very impressed by your results. My question is, do you think the evidence that you've discovered is well known up in Harrisburg by the members of the General Assembly? And if not, should it be?
I don't know if members of the General Assembly even realize what the mandates are. Meaning that they don't realize that it's the law that these students have to be included in general education classes, and if they're not supporting that through different initiatives or supporting that through funding, it's very difficult for a general education teacher that has 20-25 students sitting in front of them, and they have to meet the needs of all those students. Students with disabilities obviously have IEPs, but every student in that classroom has a different way they learn, have different deficits, have different strengths. And I think if we're not recognizing that from a state level, it's really difficult for teachers to meet the needs of students in their classroom.
So based on your reply, I'm going on the premise that time spent informing some of our elected representatives, some if not all, of your research would be time well spent.
As long as I don't have to present, yes, that would be great.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mrs. Turner?
Dr. Campbell, I was just wondering, have you thought at all about how your research could maybe impact our student teachers and the time they spend with us here and better preparing them to become those novice teachers and maybe have a better head start than those before them?
So one thing that also came through the research that I did, which I didn't present here, was that student teachers that actually have their classwork coupled with field experience actually have a much more positive attitude about inclusion of students with disabilities. So I think exposing them to those classrooms, I remember when I came out of school, I think that my student teaching experience was very guarded, meaning that I was very successful, but when I went into a classroom of my own, it was eye-opening for me. So I think that having them have an authentic experience of what they will see when they actually have their own classroom with those differences between students. We have students that need to excel. We have students that have deficits. We have students that English is their second language. We have all these different students that we need to make sure that we're meeting their needs. And I think giving them that authentic experience as a student teacher is very, very beneficial.
Mrs. San Martin?
Thank you. So I was very happy to see that one of the common themes was the peer mentoring and support, because I feel like for novice teachers, time to collaborate with experienced teachers is invaluable. When they are able to share their experiences and what works for them, it helps the novice teachers, then feel seen and heard because they are in the environment, they're in the trenches, and they understand where they're coming from. And I think that time is very valuable as well.
Am I right, just thinking about student teachers, am I right that student teachers that we have in our district are able to participate in our professional development, or does their schedule allow that? I don't know, that may be a Dr. Lorfink question.
Yeah, it depends on their schedule. Often in the spring, most of our student teachers are here in the fall doing a couple day a week, few hours a day field experience, partnered with their full 5 day a week, all day student teaching in the spring. So certainly depending on their schedule, they're always welcome to join us.
Yeah, so that's a
Yeah,
doubly
that also
good thing.
applies to our substitutes as well. We do offer that
good to know.
opportunity to our substitutes if they'd like to come in to get some professional learning and Act 48 credit as well.
Yeah, good to know. Ellen?
I'm wondering if we've come far enough in the county where some of the districts have overlapping days such as this, that we offer the opportunity for the colleagues from other districts to join us. Do we attempt to do that, or is that like?
I will say we continue to try to manage those complex schedules. The calendar becomes the problematic piece to that. How do we align those calendars? But there are opportunities. In most cases, what it is the day is arranged, and more than likely 100% of the districts are pulling the teachers with the substitute just to get them to collaborate. Yeah.
Now, I was curious, particularly
Agreed.
coming from York Adams Academy, where we don't have the opportunity to offer these kinds of days. We're more than willing for our teachers to,
Right.
if they know the schedule, to avail themselves of this opportunity. I think that's a
Good point.
really good way. Thank you.
Well, I wanted to just again say thank you to Dr. Campbell. And when you wrestle with a topic for 4 years, you have to be truly passionate about it. And I think you heard that from Dr. Campbell. There would be no other person to lead our pupil services department other than Dr. Campbell. And you heard 2 big conversations relative to the supportive environment from her study, but also those positive behavior report systems. Both of those have been the cornerstone to her joining the district, and has been a lot of hard work and a lot of effort to continue to evolve those programs. So it's nice to see that the work that she's doing is continuing to make a positive impact. She's passionate about it. She advocates for it, and we appreciate all that she's doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yay.
So the next item that I have for a visitor this evening is Mr. Wentz to share an update on intermediate and high school project planning and design updates.
Thank you, Dr. Krauser. And I have with me tonight Mr. John Michael with Vidavia. He'll be co-presenting in the budget update portion. We're going to follow the same format we typically follow for this, but we are going to shift up the sequence tonight. We're going to go through design process updates, schedule updates, and then we'll finish out with probable cost factor updates. In the last 4 weeks, the intermediate school, we had meetings with the Performing Arts and Stage Consultant Coordination. That was on 9/6, September 6th. We met with the educators for the Performing Arts program. We specifically talked about the stage, configuration, accessories for the stage, and how that would function. We did have an administrative meeting on September 9th. That had updates for both the high school and the intermediate school project at that date. We've continued the weekly team coordination meetings. That's the design team. Continue that coordination effort through construction documents. And then we did have a property and finance committee update on Monday of last week. That was September 16th. That was specifically to review the condition of the pool. The petrographic testing came back. We gave the board members at that committee a update on that report, which was mentioned earlier during public comment. As far as the next 4 weeks, there is going to be a township zoning hearing meeting. That's going to be October 3rd. I'm going to get into a little more detail on the next slide about that. We will be on the Township Planning Committee meeting. That'll be, did I say September 3rd? That's October 3rd. And then the Planning Committee meeting will be October 17th. And again, we'll continue with the weekly design team coordination meetings and administrative meetings. As far as the zoning meeting, so we've been going through the land development process. We have been communicating with the township and responding to comments received. One of the comments received was that we are going to be required, and I believe I reported this last month, that we are going to be required to apply for a zoning variance. And it's specific to parking in what they consider the yard. And they did clarify that it's not all yards of the property. It is actually just the front yard of the property. And the front yard of the property, if you've been to that school, you know most of the parking, a lot of the parking is in the front yard currently. And because of the location of the building being pushed back so that the new school can be built while the existing school remains in operation, it pushes that front of yard, or that front yard portion, what they consider that is the front of the building to the street. So we've actually increased the front yard by having the building in the back part, that kind of northeast corner of the property. It is a requirement that we'll have to go for a zoning variance for that. There are actually 3 zoning variances we applied for. The second one is really an if required zoning variance. Parking, they do have a standard calculation for the parking, and it's based on classroom counts in the building. And then in addition to that, they consider a meeting space. They're considering the gymnasium as a meeting space since it has a platform associated with it. So they have a calculation for that as well. Now, if we go through those calculations based on the seating layout submitted for that gymnasium as an auditorium use, the requirement should be 239 parking spots. And we were able to demonstrate through K&W's diagram that the site has the ability to hold 273. spaces, and that was what was submitted. So you may ask why we have to apply for a variance. It's really coming down to if the township agrees with the calculation or the layout for that gymnasium use. If they have a disagreement, we have to be, we don't want to have to go back for a second variance request for that. So that's all part of that same conversation. And then the third variance request is actually related to an animated sign that we would like for the monument sign for the school. This is really more for public information. It's not really an advertisement board, which I believe is what the zoning tries to avoid, having some sort of advertisement happening in a residential neighborhood. This is really more for the ability to easily update the community on events, upcoming community items that they might be interested in. Questions on the zoning? All right. And then the planning committee meeting, that'll be on the 17th, as mentioned. Again, we are down to a handful of comments. Half of them are related to those zoning variances mentioned previously. So K&W is very confident we'll be able to get through the next round. The traffic impact study, there were additional intersections that were required to be studied during school hours when school was in session. And those intersections are listed there. They were studied. TRG has not provided me their final report, but they have indicated that the results of that study yielded no additional recommendations from TRG. So that'll be that is part of that land development submission as well. As far as the schedule goes, we have gone through and updated the schedule based on the zoning hearing meeting. So the last time that I gave the update on the schedule, we did not have confirmation that we're going to be on the October 3rd meeting. So we know that now. We don't really want to start the process of Act 34 until we have confirmation on the 3rd that everything is okay. If they come back and they provide us with additional recommendations or additional requirements, we might want to react to that and consider it before advertising for an Act 34. So we're still, if you see that schedule down at the bottom, we're still holding October 2024 for an Act 34, and we'll release the advertisement after the October 3rd zoning meeting if we feel it's appropriate. We are still on schedule, 95% check set. Beginning of October, we'll be sitting down with the school district, particularly the facilities, doing a page turn with them, making sure everything is in alignment with our discussions. We do have the 100% construction document set scheduled to be wrapped up at the end of October there on the 21st. We do have a public comment period if that zoning hearing meeting does go well. I'm sorry. Yes, public comment period. If the Act 34 does get held at the end of October, that would be a 30-day required public comment, and that would wrap up right around November 29th. And then the next decision for the board, it would be that approval to solicit bids. So we want to make sure we receive the comments from the Act 34. That 30-day window has passed before the board is asked to release documents for bids. So that's that December 3rd date. Everything else kind of gants out from there. The bid opening would be in the beginning of February. We have it lined up that there would be a property and finance committee meeting. So we'd be able to review the results of the bid, analyze it, and report out. Right now that's being proposed for the 20th of January. And then approval of the bid results would be January 27th. We would then issue an intent to award. And then as soon as the contracts have come back, be able to issue a notice to proceed in February, on February 11th. So that keeps us on track. That schedule has been reduced. If we slide up to that more graphic schedule, in order to maintain the end date, we have actually reduced the construction window. You see that new construction green bar at the top is now reading 17 months instead of the 18 months it previously read. That's because the bidding window has slid back as a result of the zoning. So compressing the construction just a little bit, but keeping that same school year 26-27 as the opening. Questions on the schedule?
Yeah, just a question for you. So how do you knock out 1/18 of the construction schedule? How does that happen?
So we talked about it with our partners at Fidavia, and it has to do with we know the level of documentation that we have at this point. We know the extent of construction, and we feel comfortable saying we can achieve it in that period of time, given the start date, given the weather conditions, given the cycles that we have. So before we made that decision, we did talk, John and I talked, and we felt it was a reasonable construction schedule for that.
Okay, so you're taking a month out. So I assume you're accelerating some things, or can you? I guess I'm just not clear on how you're knocking a month out.
So that 18-month was determined way back before we even put pen to paper on this. Now we know a lot more than we did at the time that we initially developed that schedule, and we felt comfortable at this point knowing the construction type, knowing the months that we have, taking that 1 month out, and feeling it will not negatively affect the bid results.
So you're not concerned by knocking out that month that we're accelerating things to the point where permits or whatsoever else or things that would need to be verified with the township, there's not going to be another mistake made like we had with the drilling, correct? That's what I'm asking.
So the schedule is dependent on approval of permits. I believe that's a little note down there if we go just a little bit further down. So construction schedule is pending municipality and regulatory agency approval. So yes, we are going through the process. We will be. There's a reason that we're finishing up the construction documents at the end of October, but we're not bidding until much later. We're starting that process of the building permit review, and we should already have all major comments received from land development at that point.
Right, but you're not accelerating any of the key components of the project. I get the approval process, and I get it if we have an absolute crazy cold winter where it prevents you from moving forward with work weather delays. But what I'm telling you is, or what I'm asking you, not telling you, asking you is, did you accelerate any of the programs, installation of electric, whatever? You guys are in the construction world, your terms, not mine. Did you accelerate any of the timetables for when we go out to bid? So, for example, framing. If framing was originally 2 months, did you now take that down to 6 weeks? That's what I'm asking.
So, I mean,
and framing's just an example.
The short answer is, we've taken a month out of it. So yes, the entire schedule is accelerated, but the type of construction, we have a lot less unknowns than we did when we originally put the schedule together. And we felt comfortable at this point saying this is achievable. It's a very standard type of construction. It's it's a carbon copy, one floor to the next. So they do it on the first floor, they redo it on the second floor. There's a lot of efficiencies to it. We didn't know that at the onset. We know that now. And again, we felt comfortable as a team, both construction management and architects, saying, and also talking to our civil engineers, saying that, yeah, this is achievable within 17 months without negatively affecting the project. So to answer your question shortly, the answer is yes, things are accelerated. It's spread out over that entire 17 months. The bidders are told at through the specifications what the schedule is and what they have to execute it. And they are reasonably responsible then for holding that schedule when they submit a bid.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Then we can move on to the next one. So cost estimate. I want to talk about the probable cost estimate and really what is an estimate. We were having the administrative team update last week, I guess it was 2 weeks ago. And we were talking about what an estimate is. An estimate is basically it's a development of the probable cost of construction with the information that you have at the time. And that information is really determined, that information, what you pull and you use to gather and inform your estimate, it really can inform the final estimate depending on what set of factors you put in. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about how is cost estimate developed. I'll touch on it briefly. It is a really complicated process. But in general, in those two columns there, we have CRA and FDAVIA. If you scroll down just a little bit, the way CRA does it, and it's very similar to the way FDAVIA does it, we use cost information based on square footage from recently bid projects and recently opened CRA projects. And I think that's a really key part. So we use Crabtree Rohrbaugh and Associate projects exclusively because we have a standard type of construction that we use on almost every project. Contractors are familiar and comfortable with the way we put documents together. So when they receive a set of documents, they understand, what this type of wall is, how these pieces go together, how these restrooms are configured. They've done it before. They're familiar with it. They feel comfortable with it. And when we get those bid results, we only look at our projects. So what we try and do is we try and find projects that are similar scope and scale. And we try and include line items. If there's any particular unique items for this school, we would then include line items for that. Let's say there was a planetarium, where there is not a planetarium in this one. But as an example, if there's a planetarium, we'd hold a separate line item for that equipment. We can figure out through coordinating with consultants what that equipment will cost. We hold it as a line item. That's a unique feature. Now, the nice thing about this project is we don't have a ton of unique features, things that are outside the regular purview of a project of this size and scale. So we don't have to really pull any of those special circumstances in. And then we also consider market conditions, trends, and other items that affect time. And what I mean by time is the amount of time it takes to construct a project. So if we were working in certain counties down in Maryland, I would say there's a very long approval process and inspections, and that would extend the length of a construction project. That's not the case here. So we're pretty much in a good market condition for the estimates that we're receiving and comparing it to. Now, Fidavia, and I'll let John talk a little bit about their methodology here too, if he chooses to. But I think the key point is that they take a look at the entire market. While Crabtree, we're looking at our own projects and the bid results from our own projects. They're really taking a larger cross section of the market that includes other architects' products.
Oh, yeah, I would agree with everything that Seth said. I would add that it's at this stage where we still do square foot based when we're in the design phase. When construction phase and construction documents during that phase, we actually begin, we have data we can actually take off the project with hard numbers. But where we are now, and we do, we're involved in numerous districts, numerous projects. So we have data coming in all the time. We have bid openings coming all the time. And our team gets together and, we look at where the current design is, and that's the data we use. I think in Crabtree's case, when it's their own project, it may be, it may be a little closer. We also use, and we'll get into some of this, we use a different structure for contingencies and put aside monies. So we've worked a little bit to try and level that up. And when we do the next update from now, we'll have 3 or 4 more bid openings under our belt. So we'll be able to continue to fine tune that moving forward.
So the last time we got a budget update, it was from John Badia. I believe he reported virtually. That was back in June. If we go to the next slide, he'd used the Middletown Area Public School bid results that we received. It was a similar school, kind of similar size, very similar construction type. And that had come in at the $258 a square foot. What we have recently found out in the past couple of months is that the electrician, the low electrical for that project, they had missed project scope. And you have an opportunity, the bidders have an opportunity to pull their bids at that point. They decided not to, and they ate that difference. So Middletown Area School District actually got a little bit of a gift from the electrician there that resulted in a lower cost per square foot of construction as we were comparing that to our estimate. Now, since that came to light, we went back and we revisited our design development estimate. And in coordination with Fidavia and looking at the next responsible low bidder for electrical, we did increase the electrical number from $35 a square foot up to $46 a square foot. That updated, and another minor tweak, updated the cost per square foot of this project from the 280 up to the 293. So that cost per square foot, that excludes site work. I just want to make a point of that. And as we've been sharing for several months now, there's a 5,000 square foot, there's 5,000 additional square feet in this building project. We've been reporting that out every single month in that last slide. And Dr. Krauser did ask me just to clarify what was causing the result of that 5,000 square feet. And looking back, there was a request from teachers and vetted through the administrative team for larger classrooms. When we did that study, I believe we came in at 800 square feet per classroom, and there's a request to increase that to 900 square feet. And that goes over, I believe it's 22 classrooms in the building. There was expanded need for storage beyond what the study had. There were additional de-escalation rooms included in the project beyond the study, and there were some additional conference and small group instruction spaces. So in dissecting what that 5,000 square foot encompasses, that's what those line items are. So if we go to the next slide, and if we can zoom out perhaps just a little bit there to be able to see the whole thing. You'll see there, the electrical number there is kind of highlighted in that red dashed area. That electrical number has increased from what was previously 4.37 million. With that updated electrical number, it's now 5.75 million. And what happens here is what we've also done in that general construction area, we've also included the escalation factors. You'll see down there, first line under escalation factors, escalation to midpoint of construction. We have that noted as included above. We did that to format it the same way that Fidavia puts their estimate together. That way, when we do compare these numbers, it's more apples to apples. So essentially, if you look at that, that electrical number has increased. All other numbers, with the exception of the escalation factor just being included in the line item above, have remained the same. But it does affect the soft cost numbers. So escalation factors, those are items that affect you from the time that you are starting the project to the time you get to midpoint of construction. And you choose midpoint of construction, or at least Crabtree chooses midpoint of construction, because by that point, all materials should already be procured and under contract. So escalation stops at that point. We also have estimated contingency in that area for the escalation factors, and that's there simply to cover items that are unknowns at this point. The soft costs, those include everything from professional service fees to township fees, permit fees, all the studies, traffic studies, those kind of items, right down to commissioning for the project. That's what's included in those soft costs there. And that's broken out into construction related and non-construction related soft costs. And the reason I point that out, all of those are percentage-based items unless we know it and we hard key those items in. Now, as it relates to professional service fees, we know what those are going to be. We have, for example, the civil engineer, we have the food service, we hard key those items in. It's no longer percentage-based. But when you have something like that electrical number that increases and some of those factors down there in the escalation of the soft cost are still based on a percentage, that means that those numbers are also going to increase. So if you had, and I'll just use round numbers here, if you had a $1.2 million increase for electrical, it really results in what you see there is the $1.48 million in the delta from the previous estimate. So the previous estimates that we've been looking at, they were down in the, let me pull that up here. Well, they were $1.48 million lower. So that's been updated here to read a total at this point in this update of $46.25 million. Now I'll hand it over to John here to go through Fidavia's, and then I do want to take a minute and kind of compare our two estimates side by side.
Now our estimate is formatted a little more similar to Crabtree's, although he did more of the coming to our side. But this is the way that we typically set it up. We break it up by trade. Again, at this stage, these are square foot numbers, but these are numbers that we're familiar with as a company. We do a lot of work with more engineering, and they're very consistent. We know what their numbers are, so it allows us to, we feel, get pretty solid with when it comes down to square footages. The big difference would be some of the design elements, the structure and the general contractor, where again we're using numbers from multiple different architects. So that's where it comes in there. Our site work allowance number, that's an actual takeoff on that one. That is not a square foot, and we're actually came in a little bit lower than I guess where K and W is now. And again, that will go back together. So when we look at our hard costs, we're running a little bit higher, but we're also a bit more conservative. The escalation factors, the market contingency, we're still carrying 5% for that. And that is really just, I look at that as that just is a little buffer of preparation on bid day. The market is still pretty volatile. Construction materials are all over the place. So that is a contingency that you hope you don't have to use, but we try and put it out there for everybody to prepare for that. And then the construction contingency, we're still carrying 4% for that. Now, historically on a new building, this would cover any change orders that would come up on the project. Historically on a new build, we're seeing 1.5 to 2 tops for all change orders related to a project, including owner requested change orders. So again, I will admit there is some, these are conservative numbers at this stage. That's the way we do it. And then as we go through consecutive, we tend to tighten it up some. The soft costs, we've struggled to match a little bit. Just with where we put things. I would just concur with Seth that this is at this point in the game, this is a catch-all for all non-construction related costs. And we've tried to pull things out, move things around. Not that our numbers match, but that where our pools of money are to get that to make a little bit more sense. The financing FF&E fees stuff that we just carried we didn't have any additional information over and above what Crabtree had. I don't know if there's any other questions about our estimate initially.
Can y'all hear me?
Okay, we got you. Yep.
Thanks. So focusing on the deltas between the two cost estimates, Mr. Winston, Mr. Michael, it seems like we're perhaps looking at two different methodologies for modeling here. One in which the principal input is in square feet, but Mr. Michael, you referred to sort of stages of getting closer to precision here, where you perhaps will do something that's more like a work breakdown structure, where you're going to get to individual tasks and subtasks and assign labor and material input requirements and costs to those. Are you and CRA at sort of slightly different stages in where you are applying that, where CRA is still driven principally by square footage? And will we be getting another round of estimates that are closer to the work breakdown structure approach?
I'll try and answer them backwards. Yes, you will. This is the design phase, so there's not a lot of construction detail yet. This is typical. That's when you enter the third and final phase. So there's really not another. The design isn't far enough along to do real quantity takeoffs because every wall is not itemized. The floor type's not there. What type of ceiling tile, whether it's a metal stud wall or a masonry wall necessarily. A lot of those details need to get filled in, and they get filled in during the CD phase, during the final phase that we're just kind of getting into now. And yes, at that time, our estimate, we usually break it down by CSI code. Like you'll see numbers for masonry, numbers for roofing, to go down through. But that comes together usually shortly before it goes out to bid.
Will be closer, presumably, to the methodology that will be applied by the bidders in putting forth their cost estimates that they expect to be held to should they be favored with the award of the contract.
That's correct. And we also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and some of our contingencies, we also, as things go along, we tend to tighten them up a little bit. If we have a comfort level that the documents are good, they're solid, and we're expecting good competitive bids, we'll often, in our last round of estimating, we'll tighten up some of the contingencies.
And Mr. Michael, one more thing. The answer to this can wait if my colleagues have more pressing questions on the details here. But it might be beneficial for the public to hear, and I know you're probably not the sales guy. I'm sorry to put you in this position to give the elevator speech. If you could give us, say, 15 to 30 seconds on the role of a construction manager in dealing with things like conflicts among subcontractors and cost overruns and change orders.
I can speak a little bit to that. I'm in pre-construction. Okay. So all of my focus is on land approvals, approvals in general, whatever help we can do there, estimating, tracking the budget, bidder recruitment, getting people interested, getting it on their calendars early. To speak to you with our construction department, we would have someone on site that is interacting in all of that from the inception, from day one. They're involved in whether it be any disputes, any potential change orders, problems, scheduling issues. Our construction crew, they track the construction schedule daily. Like there's daily reports that go out. And those are the kind of things that keep you from running into a problem in the first place. And yeah, I'm not the elevator speech guy. I'm the math guy.
So in the hypothetical situation where you have two subcontractors pointing fingers at each other and saying, this is not moving forward because it's his fault, your firm would bring a construction engineer or a lawyer or a combination of those folks to bear on that and say, it's A's fault or it is B's fault, and this is how we're resolving it. Now get back to work.
Yeah, if that issue was between two prime contractors, that would be the case. If the issue was actually between two subcontractors under one prime, then no, we would just deal through that prime. Does that make sense? You use the term subcontractor. So if the general contractor, if he has a problem between his mason and his structural steel guy, no, we would just work with the GC. I mean, he's ultimately responsible for the subs that he contracted for the project.
I'd like to go to the next slide. It actually compares both Fidavia's estimate and Crabtree's estimate. What you see there in that first highlighted red number that says the 3% between them, that's what we're referring to as the hard cost of construction. That's the actual physical cost of the construction project itself, not the soft costs and everything else associated after that. And this is actually good news that, after Crabtree included the escalation factors into that our numbers are 3% from each other. It's not a huge spread. And actually, at the onset of us comparing our budgets, that's a really good place to be. The difference that we're seeing, the majority of the difference, is really in those escalation and soft cost areas. Crabtree takes a methodology where we try and get as close to reality as possible, as fast as possible, because what we don't want the school to do is to miss out on an opportunity to design something or include something in their project because you feel like you can't afford it. So you see there under the contingency, Crabtree has 2% for contingency and Fidavia has 4% for contingency. And that comes out to a pretty significant number. I mean, that's $1 million right there. And that goes back to what John was saying about they include these numbers at the beginning to be conservative. And as you have more information, they start dialing those back in. So in a situation like that, I feel like we're going to get those two numbers. We're at a 60 or 7% difference between those two. We're going to get those a lot closer as we move forward through the construction document piece because there will be a lot less unknowns. As John had mentioned, we understand what we are putting in the project, but they need to fully see the documents and specifications to get them the same page. We also have the soft costs there. Now, as we get further through the project, there are less questions about what the soft costs are because we know all the commissioning, we know all the fees that are going to be associated with permitting. So we're able to get on the same page there. I know we're at a 21% difference right now. By the time we get through the next step of this process and construction documents, I feel like we're going to be, more in step when it comes to that. And then the additional, when you have the financing fees and then the furniture, finishes, and equipment, again, that's percentage based, and Crabtree is actually slightly higher than Fidavia on that one. We're a little 3% higher. So I think what I would like the board to take away from this is that the hard cost to construction, we are pretty much in line. Being 3% from each other on the first pass that we're comparing each other's estimates is a really good place to be. Where we have our homework to do is really that part in the middle, and it's with those soft costs and escalation factors. John, is there anything you want to add to that? Questions?
Yeah, just a few questions for both. So, Mr. Wentz, the Middletown area school district, was that your project?
No, it was not.
Okay, all right.
But it was the firm's project.
Okay. So it was Crabtree Rohrball's project. Was Fidavia involved in that? Okay. All right. If I look at your numbers, I see a 6% to 12% increase versus what the prior estimate was. Crabtree's numbers, Fidavia's numbers. Am I looking at that correct? Versus the prior 43.7, I think is what the prior estimate was. Is that correct? We're seeing an increase there?
I didn't do the specific math, but I'm trusting that you did it correctly.
I did. I just want to confirm that it's increasing. So you guys are in a 3% band together, but both numbers are higher than what your original hard cost estimates were, correct?
As a result of the updates that we got from recent bids, correct.
You got recent bids.
That was that Middletown area school district, and we were updating it from the June report
for the electrical costs
based on the additional information we got post bid.
Okay. So you have these soft costs that are sitting in there. You're at 4%, you're at 2%. Where do you really think it's the 4% contingency?
Oh, the contingency.
Sorry, I'm not in construction, so
I
if I misuse your terms, feel free to correct me. I'm happy to be educated on this. So where do you think it's going to land? Is it closer to 2%? Is it below 2%? Is it 4%? I don't know, because all I've seen thus far are costs going up each time you come up here, Mr. Wentz. So I'm just curious, what number am I supposed to look at and believe?
So Crabtree has a history of coming in. Now that specific item at the 2%, that's for that's contingency. So that's for items that are unforeseen or owner added items during construction.
Yep.
We historically come in around 1 to 1.5% as a firm. So holding that 2%, we believe that we already have additional contingency built into the project.
But you're saying that number's historically on average is 1 to 1.5%.
For a Crabtree project, correct.
For a Crabtree project. What about for a Fidavia
And
project?
I think, and I touched on that a little bit, I think on our data, now again, our data covers a lot more architects, but on Fidavia projects, I would say we're probably looking at an average about 1.5.
Okay.
And if we factor in owner requested change orders, I would say that number would probably float closer to 2%. In other words, things that districts ask to be added, that's of no fault of failure of design or, anything else. So, yeah. And we agree. We're always very open that we start high and we're covered. So that speaks to why I'm at 4% and he's already down at the 2.
So when would we as a board be informed that it's coming down to 2%?
Well, a lot of times the board will give input and say we'd rather leave it in there or let's take it out. Let's tighten it up. I guess it depends on what you want to see this document be, what kind of a tool we're going to use this for as we approach this thing going out to bid.
Is that done during the Act 34 hearing? Is that done during bond offering? I mean, I'm just trying to. You guys are the experts.
Part of it would be the Act 34 hearing. They give you some wiggle room there in terms of your estimating, but part of it would be there. We certainly wouldn't recommend going below 2%.
Fair. We're going to have to make some decisions on how much money we're borrowing here. And right now, what I see is an increase on your numbers, close to $5 million, on your numbers, close to $3 million. So that's why, or maybe it's $2.5 million, but regardless, 43.7, 46 point whatever, and then yours is at 48.
Yeah, I believe for Crabtree's number, it was a 1.48.
I'm rounding up, but 46 and change is what the number is that you're putting in, correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat
46 and point. It's not important. What I'm getting at is trying to get to the best possible number we can. So we're going from 4 to 2, and now you're telling me your average is 1.5 to 2. And you only told me that because I asked the question. I don't know why we weren't provided that information right from the get-go. If that's your historic average, why wouldn't you tell us that in the presentation? That's a question.
I believe he did mention that during the initial presentation, but that he was holding 4 because he likes to start conservative.
Yeah, but Seth, you've been up here how many different times, and you've had contingencies in there. My question is, why couldn't we see the numbers that you've historically averaged at? Why are you baking in? Because I know I've asked you about contingencies in the past. So why can't you be straight with us and tell us what the averages are? We're looking at 43 points. No, you haven't. You haven't. I've asked you about contingencies.
A difference of opinion there. We have
no, it's not an opinion, and we can go back to the tape, and I've asked you the specific question.
I'm sorry. Oh, good. Yeah.
I do believe we have been transparent about what is included in costs. I believe we did an entire presentation about what soft costs are, and we did talk about contingencies and what's being held. So I do believe we've been transparent.
Okay. That's an opinion.
Anything else for these gentlemen?
I believe that's the report I have today. And it's just the same graphic we've shared every single meeting. Again, square footage there is noted at the 125,000 square feet as opposed to the study at 120. And we have updated the number there to match the Crabtree number. and we'll continue to work with Fidavy and our partners there to get our estimates in closer alignment.
Can I ask one question before we
Sure,
wrap up?
sure.
So after the bidding process, bids come in, not all of this is decided at that point, right? Like we get the bids in, we know what a lot of these things, like the hard numbers we're going to get, but the things that could possibly change, for instance, soft costs, is that something that could change after the bids?
They shouldn't. I mean,
Okay.
a lot of the items like I'll use commissioning as an example. So as we get closer to 100% construction documents, we're going to send this out to commissioning agents like Barry Isit, and we're going to ask them what their numbers are to do the commissioning, and we'll be including that in our final budget update. So we should have more hard keyed items and less percentage based items as we get closer to that final estimate.
So when we're thinking about how to approach that contingency, the 2 to 4%, and what we want to go with, that is, so if we get the bids in, we are presented a final number by you because the bids are in and this is going to cost now. That contingency amount is for anything that could be added on later. Anything that goes up costs more after the bids come in. So is it
The construction contingency?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be like, I call it the change order fund.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like a savings account, really. Like it's there if we need it. Hopefully we don't.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
And by the time that the bids come in, the vast majority of the soft costs are now, by this point, they're hard numbers.
Okay.
It's things like testing, permitting, much smaller values where there's going to be variables, and some of them may go over, some of them may come under. But I would say probably 75 to 80% of your soft costs will now be hard budgets by that time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Moving along in my report, I know Nicole mentioned a little bit, just a couple updates that are coming our way. Since a busy week, lots of excitement happening on campus as we approach getting everybody ready for the next for Thursday. So, again, communicating, encouraging everybody to join us, start welcoming activities. Said it since the time I arrived in District 7 2 years ago. Coming is a very special experience here. Never had an opportunity to pray, festivities, bonfire on the hill. It's a great experience with families. We encourage everyone to join us at the end of 5 p.m. with our powder puff game, and then of course the parade, bonfire, ending with the students versus faculty powder puff experience. So that's a pleasure for all to enjoy. And then of course we celebrate homecoming court and kick off the game on Friday night and our days. Saturday. More additional items, of course, there's a court meeting schedule.
Any questions for Dr. Crouch? Okay, thanks very much. That brings us to the business office. Mrs. Kendi.
Thank you. The business office report for you is the consent agenda. Would any members like any of these items considered separately, or are there any questions on any of these items? If not,
Consider number 1 separate. Okay. Could I have a motion then? Well, let's just do item number 1 first. Could I have a motion? So, thank you. Is there discussion particular to that item?
No, I just plan to abstain from the vote.
Understood. Okay. Then number 1, administration recommends approval for the affiliation agreement between York Suburban and York College. Are there any votes to the contrary? 1 abstention. Okay, hearing no dissenting votes, then that can pass. And now items, thank you for that, by the way. Items 2 through 5 then under the business report. May I have a motion, please? And a second, thank you. Are there questions? We have a motion and a second for items 2 through 5.
I had a question.
Okay.
For item number 3 with 11 legal group, is that a service that stocks and leaders, like, they can help us with?
So technically we could, but the Living Legal Group is the expert on dealing with charters within the state. They are the prior expert on the charters that this district has previously dealt with, including the regional charters. And so the way they've structured this is with 3 clients that are all technically also stock and leader clients, but it's always been our recommendation for that to be separately addressed through special counsel, just because it has worked so well up until now with their layer of expertise. Our firm doesn't traditionally do multiple appeals of charter issues. We handle day-to-day charter issues, but not the type of work that Ms. Levin is doing. So I really would recommend that you use her. It's very efficient and it's shared costs. So I think it's the right thing for the district.
Thank you.
I really respect her work.
And just to clarify, that's the 3 charter school districts are Central, the city, and York Suburban.
For for the regional charter school.
Right.
And the specific solicitor has been the one who has been with them since the inception.
Yes. Ms. Peterson has worked since the beginning of that and through any prior renewals, and has provided advice to the district throughout that historical relationship.
Thank you for that clarification. Does that answer? Okay. Any other items for discussion on numbers 2 through 5? Okay, we have a motion and a second. We've had some discussion. Are there votes to the contrary? Hearing none, then that motion can also pass.
That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kendig. Dr. Sullivan, do you have anything from academic standards?
Just to say briefly, once again, that our October report will consist of a review of the 23-24 data. November will be a review of the use of professional development time, and December will be a preview of new and revised courses.
Okay, thanks very much. Any questions, anything for Dr. Sullivan? Thank you for that. Mrs. Fryrick, have you anything from communications?
Not at this time. No report tonight.
Thank you. That brings us to Personnel Committee. Mr. Robinson.
Thank you, Madam President. You have before you the personnel report. Were any board member like any of these items considered separately, or are there any questions on any of these items? If not, the chair moves approval of the below mentioned items.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Any votes to the contrary? Hearing none, motion can pass. Unfortunately, Mr. Desai is not with us this evening, so we will forego the Property and Finance Committee until our next gathering. LIU, Mrs. Fryrick.
I think we have some highlights to show you from the special board meeting held on September 11th, at which time the LIU board was pleased to present and vote upon hiring Dr. Christopher Marchese as the new executive director. He will begin coming in a few days between now and the beginning of next year, and will hopefully assume his position sometime shortly after the new year, depending on how much he is held by his previous employer. Those who interviewed him are very excited, feels that he brings a very good perspective to the IU, and is coming with a real understanding of what the IU is looking at in the future years ahead. Mrs. Schrader, you may have some other thoughts on this, because I don't know where anybody out of the School of Technology involved in this or not. You know, this is what I've heard from people, as well as there was a release to members of the Joint Operating Authority. So we're welcoming him aboard, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, and thanks to those people. That's a big job to go out and find somebody for the a new director for the IU. So thanks to those people involved with that. York Adams.
Well, the Joint Operating Authority, let me just say, they are beginning to listen. Again, you're hearing, I think, over at the School of Technology, they're doing a RFP.
Feasibility study
to see what may or may not be coming down in the future as far as facility here in York County. So everybody wants to stay tuned for that. York Adams Academy is off to a roaring start, and we already have something like 10 graduates for our graduation in January, so we're very excited about that. And Suburban is rapidly filling their 15 seats without any problems. And we've had several districts come to us who had not previously been part of the York Adams Academy, and they've wanted to know if they could buy a seat or two this year and see how it goes, and then they might consider joining us with full memberships. So,
and did I see West Shore's a newbie?
Yeah. So we're very, very excited about that.
Great. Yeah.
That concludes my report. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Robinson, legislative update.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm sure you're all joining me in being overjoyed that the Senate reconvened on September 16th, and equally pleased that the House reconvened today. Next week, October 2nd, there will be hearings on HB 2560, Outpatient Psychiatric Oversight Act, staffing flexibility for psychiatric outpatient clinics through telehealth technology, and HB 2533, aimed at a public awareness campaign of the new number 988 for the purpose of suicide prevention and mental health crisis response. It appears that some of us may be interested in attending these hearings in person and possibly using that as an opportunity to circulate information on factors influencing novice general education teachers instructing students with learning disabilities in an inclusive educational environment. More to follow on that, and we can all look forward to continued deliberation regarding charter and cyber charter reforms. If there are no questions, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Anything from Mr. Robinson? Mrs. Kindig, have you a York Adams Tax Bureau report tonight?
I do not. They've not met since our July meeting.
Okay, thank you. And as far as the School of Technology report, we have a meeting later this week, so I'll share that next time we gather. We'd like to thank everyone for joining us this evening, recognizing all of our visitors. Board members, you have a link there to upcoming events and the board and committee meeting schedule. This brings us to the second opportunity for public comment. Public comment is an opportunity to be heard by the board on agenda items or other items that may reasonably come before the board. Comments are to be directed to the entire board, not one individual board member, administrator, staff member, or the audience. Committee comments will be timed and limited to 3 minutes or less. Please note board members and staff members will not normally respond to comments or questions during our meeting. When you hear your name called, please come forward. You do not need to state your name or address before sharing your remarks. Danny Barker, Springersbury Township. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Madam President. Tonight, when you gave directions for public opinion sharing at the first segment, you laid out the boundaries verbally for what was allowed and what was not allowed. And in that portion of commentary, you specifically stated, and I quote, you specifically stated, and I quote, specific action items only. Since I know that you've missed it, it's a little hard to read these policies. You kind of made it clear that there's not a lot of care for that, but just in case, in your policy that you updated recently with a bit of a bulldozer, of course, I'm referring to policy 903, public comment on board meetings. I'd like to just read a little bit to you. It'll be helpful to you as you go forward. In order to permit fair and orderly expression of public comment, the board shall provide an opportunity at each open meeting of the board for residents, taxpayers, employees, and students to comment on matters, this is where you'll want to zone in on this real close, of concern, official action, or deliberation. Now, those are commas after that, and I'm pretty sure I'm up to speed on my English structures for sentences. That means that those are the options. They are not, as you quoted, limited to specific actions, items only. I would caution you to stay within the boundaries of your policy. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Mary Hawkins, Spring Garden Township. I believe you have a comment regarding our elementary schools. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. So York Suburban School District wants to abandon one and demolish another existing elementary school in favor of building one new facility for an estimated $45 million, which doesn't contemplate the cost of loans, fees, and interest, and will likely drive the $45 million figure up 2, 3, or even 4 times. Nor does that figure include the cost to purchase ancillary equipment and items needed to fill a new building. The proposition to dismantle East York and vacate Indian Rock Elementary in favor of one building to house all 3rd through 5th grade students is concerning on a number of levels. First, it means young children will have to be bused across town during busy traffic hours, arriving at a crowded area to disembark with 700 other rambunctious children, and do it in reverse in the afternoon, also during rush traffic times, and likely for an hour or more each way. And do the district parents of children in these grades understand this is what their children will face? Second, why are these 2 schools considered lost causes? Indian Rock is the 2nd newest school built in the district. How can it be in such disrepair to justify abandonment? Is it not the district and board's responsibility to maintain these properties? If so, it raises a question of how stewardship has been handled. And it seems far less costly to repair existing schools than the estimated $45 million plus for a new facility. As, pardon me, as to concerns about the safety of existing buildings, it seems the solution would be to make the necessary repairs to bring them up to safety standards, not tear down or abandon the building. Third, the location of the proposed building is also of great concern. It will be shoehorned into a semi-residential area with narrow streets that are already crowded with high-volume traffic. This should be a big concern for the safety of 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade children who are heedless of their surroundings and they're running to meet their friends and get to the school. A brand new building may seem appealing, but fiscal responsibility demands that we prioritize the resources we already have. If Indian Rock, again, one of the most recently constructed schools, is now being discarded, how can we have any confidence that a new building won't be deemed obsolete in just 15 or 20 years? In this region, we are surrounded by older buildings that have stood the test of time. We residents of York Suburban School District strongly request the board and superintendent to explore some other less costly options. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Sandy Quigley, Springettsbury Township. I believe you have a comment regarding the traffic at the schools. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening and thank you. I'm a resident who lives in the neighborhood of the East York Elementary School and the York Suburban Middle School, so we're kind of right in the middle of those 2. With regard to the middle school, the traffic light on Raleigh Drive and Haynes Road, I'm assuming was installed for the school buses to be able to get onto Haynes Road safely from East York Elementary School. I feel this should also apply to East York Elementary School and the York Suburban Middle School buses. The middle school buses still use Cambridge Road instead of Raleigh Drive. The speed limit on Cambridge Road is 25 miles an hour. Our house is 5 houses down from the turn from Sundale onto Cambridge Road. By the time the buses are in front of our house, these buses are flying. And we have students from the middle school that are walking home from school along that part of Cambridge Road, which does not have sidewalks. So they're walking right on the edge of the road. We've lived there for 30 years, and this has been happening all these years. The middle school buses then jam up traffic at Cambridge Road and Haynes Road because now they're trying to make a left-hand turn and there's no traffic light there, and one's not needed there because we have the one on Raleigh now. And I feel it's a requirement that they need to be using Sundale Drive to Raleigh Drive. Then they can safely make a left-hand turn onto Haynes Road. In addition to that, parents are also parked on both sides of Sundale Drive to pick up and drop off their children, which makes Sundale Drive congested and dangerous. If you're trying to turn onto Sundale Drive, you can't see either direction to pull out safely. At East York Elementary School, both sides of the streets are also parked full of parents dropping off and picking up their children. It goes from Cambridge Road to Raleigh Drive that it's backed up. This takes Erland Drive down to one lane for traffic to move through. And children also run out from in between the cars parked there, which is extremely unsafe. If a car comes down Erland Drive, someone has to back up because there's nowhere to go. It's one lane. If an emergency vehicle was trying to get to the school or one of the houses on that street, they're going to waste precious time trying to get to their destination. The traffic, which is currently horrible, will double due to the number of students from Indian Rock Elementary being added. It'll go from 300 to 700 students. And if that safety is an issue now, it will be unmanageable in the future. The school district has school buses to take children to and from school. And I feel it's reasonable to expect parents to put their children on the buses instead of hauling them to and from school every day, twice a day, and creating these nightmare scenarios. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chris Sanders, Springersbury Township. Good evening, ma'am.
They are telling us right here, right now, that the price of this project is increasing. They just told us that a few minutes ago. And once again, if the price of the project increases, the price to the residents, the cost to the residents increases. And just on a side note, I'd like to ask, maybe you can tell us at the next board meeting, how you can keep your head down, write on your pad, and listen to what people are saying at the same time. If you can do all that, that's terrific. I'd like to know how you can do that. Particularly, Madam President. I am asking each board member to look at the proposal that Joel Sears put forward individually on their own to really understand what could and can still be accomplished. It is very powerful to relook at what he is asking you to look at. After you review the proposal, I would like you to look at the design put forth by Crabtree Rohrbach. Many people think it looks like a shopping center. I would then like you to imagine a renovated and updated school, leaving the bones of East York Elementary as is, honoring both the architecture of the school and the neighborhood with a graceful and handsome new look where the people in the community know that the teachers and the children have what they need and can look at it as a real gem that was saved as a tribute to that era. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Kathy Schaefer, Spring Garden Township. Good evening again.
Good evening. Best practices evolve in many aspects of our lives, like medicine, technology, and of course, education. Indian Rock was quite novel when it was built over 50 years ago. However, in recent years, and by recent, I'm probably thinking 10 to 15, several different architectural firms informed previous boards that there were no cost-effective solutions to update the Indian Rock design to today's standards. These professional opinions were based on what is considered best practices in elementary school settings. I appreciate the board's thoughtful consideration during this lengthy process, utilizing credible professionals. I would add, it would be interesting to know, given some of the other comments this evening, for some of the adjacent districts, I'm referring mostly to Dallastown and Central, who have intermediate schools, the length of those bus time rides, considering the sizes of those districts. It would also be interesting to know that if people believe school administrators who have to work with students and parents for years to come are lying to them, it would be interesting to know what they believe the motive to be. I encourage the board to continue moving forward in order to build a better future for York Suburban. There have been recent reports on the board meeting agendas that the board has been meeting in conference sessions for the purpose of board professional development. I sincerely hope that differentiating micromanagement and governance is included, as the latter is the role of a school board director. The board hires administrators who have expertise in a specific area. It is not the board's role to micromanage their work. Lastly, I applaud board leadership at the last meeting. There are rules to follow in our schools, and there are rules to follow at board meetings. Hissy fits do not have a place in either, and consequences are appropriate in both. Thank you to board leadership.
Thank you. Harry Stroman, Spring Garden Township. Good evening, sir.
How you doing? All right, first off, I owned and operated a business in Spring Garden Township for about 40 years. And I'm just shaking my head. This whole thing makes no sense at all. You're going to close Indian Rock, which, you know, the people can look across the road and see how close the school is. And they're going to ship them out to East York. Well, that's what they did in the first place when Indian Rock was built, because there was nothing out there except a barn, a house, and a bank. No rudders, no nothing. Now it's 3 houses or 3 apartment complexes and a housing development. It doesn't make any sense to have those kids go across town. You know, they're going to have a half-hour, 45-minute drive across town and a half-hour, 45 drive back. And there's no logic, no sense to that at all. And East York, I was out there for the first time. We sold the house. I used to live on Cambridge Road, right there. I lived on Haynes Road, but right where Cambridge and Haynes meet. And those roads haven't changed since East York opened. And I went there the first year it opened. And then they added on to it, and they want to add on to it again. And those roads, I'm sorry, but I don't think they can handle it. There's too much traffic out there. Now you got 1950 development in those roads, and you got 2024 traffic. The Cambridge, Erlin, Haynes Road, and the three avenues and Raleigh Drive. I don't see where they're going to put everything. And it's just like now, Kmart is closed. And that swimming pool, well, I'll tell you what, it costs a lot to maintain a pool. It isn't just building it. It's like owning a home. You don't just build it, you maintain it. And I think you can, for 38, 40 people that use it, I think you can pay for them and have a rental pool and have it for their designated times and still have money left over. And that doesn't make any sense to me at all. And just nothing in this whole plan seems to make sense. But I know how it is, and I know it's tough. But that's exactly what I would do. I'd rent the pool out, and that one apartment building where Indian Rock School is, they're adding on to. I think they're putting in like 100 or 200 more places. But I definitely look into that.
Thank you, sir. That concludes public comment. It brings us to time for board comments. Any recognition or any comments from board members? Mrs. San Martin.
Thank you, Madam President. So as of late, we've been hearing lots of comments about our PSSA scores, and I just wanted to speak to that. So at York Suburban School District, our students are more than just test scores. While we understand concerns about PSSA performance, it's important to note that our district consistently outperforms the state average. We boast a high graduation rate, amazing athletes, musicians, artists, and our alumni frequently report feeling well prepared for both higher education and their careers. Our mission is to cultivate well-rounded individuals prepared for success beyond standardized testing. Our success is even more meaningful, given our changing demographics. Today, 42% of our students qualify for free and reduced lunch, and we have 212 English language learners who speak 30 different languages. In addition, 45 of our students are currently experiencing homelessness. Despite these challenges, our district continues to thrive, demonstrating the resilience and strength of our community. As York Suburban grows and evolves, I am glad we celebrate the diversity that enriches our schools. A principal once said, "You want to be in a place where you are celebrated, not just tolerated." And this sentiment rings true. According to the 2020 U.S. Census, the Latino population in York County is the fastest growing demographic, with about 40,000 Latinos calling the county home. As a result, our Hispanic student population has grown and is now the second largest student demographics in the district, as Mr. Krauser mentioned earlier, growing 136% over the last decade. Hispanic Heritage Month, established in 1968, provides us with an opportunity to honor the contributions, history, and culture of the Hispanic and Latinx communities. By recognizing this important month, we not only foster a sense of pride and belonging among our Hispanic students, but also encourage all students to appreciate the richness of diverse cultures. This celebration aligns with our district's commitment to inclusivity and ensures that every student feels valued and seen. Through culturally relevant activities, curriculum, and events, we provide a platform for our Hispanic students to share their heritage and history while broadening their perspectives of the entire student body. In doing so, we strengthen our collective understanding, respect, and empathy, which are essential in preparing our students for a diverse world. Supporting Hispanic Heritage Month is more than a celebration. It affirms our dedication to equal representation and to building a vibrant, inclusive community for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Especially over the last 8 to 10 months, observers have had the opportunity to witness the democratic process in our board meetings. Each member of this board is an elected volunteer, elected by the community to make decisions regarding the governance of this district. This is how public schools in Pennsylvania are governed across the Commonwealth. We're also district residents and therefore pay school taxes, as do all homeowners. Public comments related to the upcoming building project, both in opposition to the project and in favor of it, have been heard. Both the dissent and the support of the community are noted, valued, and considered by this body. Our objective is to make decisions that are in the best interest of our students, their families, and the community as a whole. This includes planning for the future, planning for families who will move into our community, and for the learners who will walk these halls in years to come, long after most of us are gone. Student needs have certainly evolved over the last couple of decades and will, no doubt, continue to change. We must plan for those inevitable changes. At the end of the day, we're charged with answering this question: what is best for kids? We're responsible to evaluate all the information available to us and make those difficult decisions. We have heard about a commitment made by some pledging to sow mistrust, to create chaos and distraction until we stop the project. Inaccurate information has been distributed in the community, attempting to frighten residents. It's been said the district can't handle the financing of such a big project. Actually, we've heard from experts in school finance, 2 different financial services companies, in fact, both expert in the complicated field of school finance. We've heard them assure us that the district stands on a solid foundation. They've also told us that our budget plan is a good one and can finance this project. Some have said our children are watching your meetings. The name calling and poor behavior needs to stop. It's a good reminder for all of us that our students are watching. They're watching our interactions and how we react to each other's comments. We are all role models for our students. It's also been said you aren't listening to us. You're going ahead with the project and you aren't listening to us. We demand that you listen to us and act on our concerns. And you work for us. You need to remember that. We actually represent the whole community, not just the loudest voices. As an assurance to the community, whether we agree with you or not, we do hear you. Your voice matters. Your dissent is noted and it's appreciated. Each of us, each of the 9 members seated here, is charged with evaluating all the information related to this project, all the public commentary, and voting in the best interest of the entire community. I'm confident the will of the board representing the entire community will prevail. Any other comments from the board? Okay, hearing none, we can stand adjourned. Thanks, everybody.